What's up, world? It's your boy, Mike Muse. Welcome to the conversation on the Mike Muse Show. I am so excited to be in conversation with my next guest. I have been a fan of her work from afar for so long, and I didn't know that she was a costume designer for one of my favorite movies of all time that I still talk about, that she is going to be surprised that actually is my favorite. It's not the one that are always listed in her incredible two-time Oscar-winning bio. It's not even any of those movies.
Not one of those?
Yeah, it's not one of those. So the amazing, I'm going to bring her in because you hear her voice already. I'm going to bring her right in. The two-time Oscar-winning, which, fun fact, I have been at each ceremony where she has gotten her Oscars. I've been able to see her on the stage, which is just remarkable. The incredible Ruth Carter. What's happening, Ruth?
Hey, thanks for having me, Mike. This is great. I'm excited.
Yeah. Same here. Well, let's get to it. Okay, just a little bit about me. You've seen me a little bit. We've had a little bit of interactions. What do you think my favorite movie is that you've done?
I'm gonna say
you'll get two shots. You get.
Okay,
I'm gonna say what do you think instinctually, and then I'll guide you.
The first one is possibly a Denzel Washington film. Ooh, I didn't like your face. Okay, so I'm not gonna say that one.
You know what? I would say it's in the top 3, so you're not too far off. Okay, but it is by the same director.
Oh, by the same director. So then are you from New York?
So I am from New York. So it's a Spike Lee. It's a Spike Lee film.
Brooklyn.
Nope. Oh. One more.
All right.
One more.
Not Malcolm X.
Which is one of my favorites. It's one of my favorites.
Okay.
Spike Lee is a fun fact. Spike Lee is one of my favorite directors of all time. So it's not fair, but so Malcolm X.
Mo Better Blues.
Nope. I love that one too. I was getting to it. School Days.
Oh my God. Why didn't I just say School Days? Everybody's always reminded me of School Days as their favorite. Why didn't I just say that?
Oh, really? You get that often about School Days?
I get that all the time.
You know what? I wouldn't have thought that because that's never one of the ones that's mentioned of all the great Spike Lee films, right? Like they're talking about so much like Do the Right Thing, Crooklyn, Malcolm X, obviously. But I feel like School Days doesn't get the justice that it deserves.
Well, people tell me they decided to go to HBCUs because of School Days.
See, I didn't go to HBCU, but I went to the PWI, but I'm in the fraternity, like all the things. But the reason why I love that, Ruth, and the reason why I think what made me fall in love with Spike Lee is because Spike has a way of dealing with social construct in a way when we weren't discussing social construct, right? But like he put it up through film and through visuals. And what's interesting about School Days is that he was so on the money that the issues of School Days still exist today. Light skin versus dark skin, straight hair versus curly natural hair, right? Like, and there was a scene where Samuel L. Jackson's in the parking lot of, I think it was the KFC, and he was like, you union kids, come here, to the locals, and you guys judge us. You look down on us, think you're better than us, right? Which is part of like that W.D. Boys and Frederick Douglass, Towns of 10 versus like the working class debate that is still so prevalent to this day. And so all those things are just so poignant even to this day. And so that's why I love School Day so much.
It's kind of like Romeo and Juliet. You can steer it up and you can bring it into another era. You can change, the narrative a little bit, but the basic core of the struggle is the same.
It is all the same. And so now, I mean, when we think about it, but that is a way of capturing culture, right? And so I didn't know that about you, but I've always been, and you and I have talked about this, I love the way that you have looked at textiles from the lens like this anthropological kind of study and discourse. I never really thought about costume design and relationship until I heard you kind of talk about that. And really my friend Lauren Backus was kind of highlighted me about that with you. But that has an understanding of culture now, knowing your entire discography, right? And so it's just like taking something like School Days, like how do you think about culture reflective in the fabrics that you're putting on these characters?
Well, we were a part of building this country. We are the framework of this building of this country. And, there was always a cottage industry on, how to dress the slaves, how to, and we were, adorning the presidents and the president's wives. We were always a part of the tapestry of this country. And that, narrative plays out from era to era to era. I mean, even in the, Harlem Renaissance and Great Migration, what we, had accomplished in art and culture was reflective in the way we looked and how we wore our clothes. And you can see the style, throughout the ages, and it just doesn't stop. We can go through the 60s and see, Black Panthers and see mod dress. We can go into the 70s and see, all of the platforms and the afros and how we interpreted style and how we use color and texture, and bring that into the 80s and talk about hip hop and an emergence of hip hop and how we formed another silhouette that was, maybe considered a hoodlum, quote unquote, fashion, just as the zoot suit was in the 40s, and then bring it into the 90s and see, how, hip hop became a part of the industry, the fashion industry, with Tommy Hilfiger and all of these representations of what we had created. And so I don't do a film without understanding the origin story of, how we came about looking this way. And that's very important, because I think representation means, a self-expression. It also means, representing culture. It also means seeing ourselves. And I'm a huge proponent of us being able to see ourselves in the most authentic way.
And I think you nailed that. I mean, audience, I want to take you through all the films that Ruth has been a part of. I'm going to leave some of them out, but just some of the highlights. Do the Right Thing, Malcolm X, What's Love Got to Do with It, Selma, Marshall, Love and Basketball, Dolomite Is My Name, Coming to America, Black Panther and Black Panther Wakanda Forever, and upcoming Blade. And that just names a few. And when you think about, Ruth, what you just mentioned, all those movies that you've done have represented all the eras and the decades and what was going on culturally throughout this time as it was happening. Then even I'm thinking about like Coming to America. I feel like almost Coming to America might have been like the precursor to Black Panther, right? When it comes to like, in terms of like the African textiles, right? Yes. And so when I'm thinking about the scene, I wanted to ask you, because I am going to pull out a scene as I'm thinking out loud. I'm going to pull out a scene from Coming to America. And then the scene for me that really let me know that you are one of the greatest of all time in Black Panther. And it was the wedding scene in Coming to America. And everyone's in the beautiful traditional African garbs. And then in the scene of Black Panther, the first one, I believe when the wrestling challenge was happening, and then you saw all the tribes like on the cliffside. And what I love though, Ruth, is that everything is so colorful, but everything was so cohesive, right? Yeah. And so how do you think about that? One, and then what are you trying to convey to the audience?
A lot of this comes from the context of the script, with Coming to America, it was a sequel, and there were these big, beautiful shapes in the first film. Everyone loved the first film. It made an impact. But there was a kind of a British, there was a British spin to it that I wanted to eliminate. And I wanted to bring more of, the authentic African shapes and fashions to it. It was a comedy, so I didn't have the pressure as much as I did with Wakanda. With the comedy, I could actually create textiles of my own. And also I wanted to involve a lot of African designers in Coming to America that I had met along the way through Black Panther, and really give them an opportunity to shine, because we were seeing more of King Akeem in Zamunda than we did in the first film, which we saw him more in New York. So then we had to build that world, and what his world around him looked like, and keep it light, keep the levity, But with Black Panther, this is a fictitious place, Wakanda, you can't go there. But it is, real in the comics, and it's a melting pot, and it's a land that exists without colonization. And so I had to make sure that I stayed close to that, eat it, and make sure what I was using, did represent the origin story of, Africa. So it was a more serious approach to Wakanda than it was to Coming to America, and that really made them different. I walked around my shop with my staff, and on Black Panther 1, I was saying, this is not Coming to America, and then lo and behold, I get Coming to America, and then I'm walking around the shop, and I'm saying, this is not Black Panther, and then I get Wakanda Forever, and we go underwater and we create this other fictitious world of the Tolacaneals, and and I have to say, this is not the Mayas. It's inspired on the Mayas, but now they have gone under the water and they have created their own world based on their environment as well, and what they see happening throughout the ages on land with their distant cousins. So all of those things are considerations. A movie like Coming to America gives you a little bit more latitude to play and to bring in color and to bring in African fashion designers. But something like Wakanda Get to Forever all has a little bit more of a purpose or an intention.
When I think about, like, the reason I decided to talk to you is I think sometimes costume designers, is often not seen for the impact of the work that it has. And in particular, a costume designer of your pedigree that has the range and versatility of films that you do costume designs for. When I just think about you, I just think about textiles, right? And so, and how what do you think the role of textiles is, right? Like one in our society, and then how important is that to translate that into film?
Yeah, well, we have to evoke emotion. And many times what we are wearing on camera becomes a part of like what the light carries. So it may be dimly lit, and then the person walks in and they have, some kind of a orangey red on, or they have some kind of a yellow on, and that actual texture and color become a part of the composition of the scene. It becomes one of the lights in the room. And so it's very important that we choose textiles and colors very carefully, because they evoke mood and response, a visceral response to that character. We take the Dora Milaje, for example, and we have this Maasai red on the Dora Milaje. So as they enter the room and you see 3, it feels like 4, feels like 6, because of the imposing color that they're presented in.
One, I didn't even think about the Maasai, but as soon as you said it, I was like, oh my God, that makes sense, right? Like the Maasai warriors and the beautiful red and the gold and the metal, like kind of when it comes to that, when it comes to, countries from like the continent, right? And then I loved how you talked about there was a nuance between the Mayan culture and the Tolso-Canelian. I don't know if I got it right. Tolso-Canel, how the difference is that, how are textiles, what importance do they hold, in those cultures and in those traditions?
Well, you take the T'Challa's big celebration, the funeral in the beginning of Wakanda Forever, and everyone is wearing white. And it's not just everyone is wearing white. It's a unification of Africa. So we have Ndebele, we have Zulu, we have Tuareg, we have the Himba. So how do we represent all of these different regions of Africa and unify them with white? So it was very important that we silk screen and we create embroidered fabrics that had their symbols, that had their expressionism in their textiles, and do it in a tonal way so that they're recognizable. And some of the shapes also, the textiles that they once they're draped and crafted, they take on the actual shape of the traditional garb. So you can look at a big scene like that, that's all done in one color, but also recognize different factions of Africa within that one color. And that's how, textiles and shapes and planning helps tell the story.
I love that audience. Ruth Carter is here to talk about her new book, The Art of Ruth E. Carter, Costuming Black History and the Afrofuture, and Do the Right Thing to Black Panther. And so that's why I'm enjoying all this conversation, because this is the richness of all that, right? Like, I just felt like you have been a part of such iconic films. And they're so iconic, not just because of the people that they're featuring in, but the way that the story was told, right? And so, and I'm even thinking about something as simple even as Malcolm X, meaning the simplicity of the textiles isn't as grand as like the difference of the patterns from the different countries within the continent, right? Of Africa. But sometimes you can do things so simple and it can still go so wrong, right? I was looking at this random thing, Ruth. It was a baking show competition on Netflix, and this team chose to do an all white cake, right? And what the judges said was that you chose the most simplistic cake, and so the most simplistic cake is actually the most difficult cake. They was like, because if you don't spread it right, you can tell the irregularities of the icing, and you can tell the irregularities of the shape of the cake. And so that's why I wanted to kind of get that into Malcolm X. I just think about how it was so simplistic, but yet even like the suits that Malcolm wore and the suits from the Brothers of Nation, right? Like it all just told this story. Like, how did you approach that? Because it was simplistic, but it was still just as powerful.
Yeah, the thing is to make it look simple, but it's never simple. Even the most simple thing is never simple.
That's why I use the cake example. Yeah.
With Malcolm X, I sectioned his life off into different quadrants, and we started out with zoot suits, and then he went to New York, and he was this New York hustler. He was a little more sophisticated. Then he went into prison, and we cleaned the palette, and everything was denim-y and blue and textural. And then he emerged from prison as Malcolm X, and he went to meet his mentor, Elijah Muhammad, and he was really humble. But then it's like a black and white film, it's very stark and very contrasty. And then he goes on his Hajj to Mecca, and he becomes El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, and he emerges with this newfound realization of Islam. And how do you project that, in his clothes? And I softened him up and gave him a little bit more textural clothes and, lighter tones. And so, there is always a roadmap. There's always a journey. And whether we recede into the background with the journey, or we want to jump out front and, design a zoot suit, it's all in the storytelling.
I love that. One quick thing I got to know, point of personal privilege, Ruth, what did you think of that scene when you were on set, when they're in front of the hospital and Denzel or Malcolm X turns his hand and he does that finger point, right? Like, do you know what I'm talking about?
I do.
Yeah. Did you realize when you were on the set, like how powerful that moment was? For me, every time I think about Malcolm X, that's the first thing that comes to my mind is that scene.
Well, the viewer experience is a lot different than the filmmaking experience. And as you might remember, that when the camera pans that line of Muslims, they're all wearing hats and scarves. It's the middle of winter in New York City. I had to make sure every hat was on right. I make sure every hat fit. And it was a scene about hats for me.
Sometimes a scene about hats is just a scene about hats, right? Here I am, Ruth, thinking about this. Oh my God, did you get goosebumps? They all shifted and
talk
turned.
About that gesture, but no.
Like, what gesture? You didn't like the hats, Mike? What about the hat?
Yeah, watch that scene again and you'll see the hats.
Oh my God. That makes me crack up so much, man. It's just those little things that you don't even think about. Like, from I love how you said from the filmmaking perspective process, all the way to like like that hat perspective, right? Okay, so one more scene, like Love and Basketball. This is fun now. Love and Basketball. The thing that comes to my mind is when it's the end and it's just they're just the two characters just playing basketball, right? Yeah. And it's a night scene, right? And when did you love and when did you first love hip hop and all that. What does that scene for you then as from the filmmaking experience, right?
Well, I think that it was such a personal story for Gina Prince Blythewood. It was very much her story, and the mood of her story was very contingent on what she wanted to tell. It was her story, and so we relied on her to how dim are the lights, how intense is the game, like how serious are you, how what's your personality? Well, Sanaa and Gina were very, very connected in terms of how they were telling this girl's story. So I follow their lead. I definitely needed Gina to give me the nuances of the character and the love story. So it was a beautiful story.
I didn't even think about that, but you're going to make me go back now and watch like those two movies in particular, because I wasn't thinking about like the questions that you were asking in terms of like, well, how intense is the game, right? Like, because that makes a difference in termination of what Sanaa ends up wearing, in that moment, right? And so, Ruth, I can spend all day with you. I just think that I want to do a pre-Oscar chat with you every year, and just to kind of get your thoughts on this, because clearly you're gonna be nominated every year. So that's just number one. So because you're such a great storyteller. I have thoroughly enjoyed our time and really just unpacking just the little brief bit that we did, audience, which is why you need to get this book, The Art of Ruth E. Carter, Costuming Black History and the Afrofuture, from Do the Right Thing to Black Panther. It's wherever you find books today. Ruth, thank you for your gift of artistry and your gift of storytelling, right? And the way you hold culture so at the forefront.
Yeah, it's my gift to the world. I'm always been a storyteller. You sit down with me at lunch and I'm just going to start telling you a story. And so now I had an opportunity to put it together in a book. So
I love that. Ruth, thank you for everything. Come back on and see me sometime soon.
Yes, I sure will.
All right. Take care, Ruth. Bye-bye.